Today I'm joined by Dan Kennedy. Dan is the CEO and founder of DK Lift Services, a family-run company providing installation, repair and maintenance services for the service and good lifts, stair lifts, home lifts and platform lifts. So welcome, Dan.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Simon. Thanks for having us on. Yeah, good to see you. I'm looking forward to running through some questions and having a good chat.
Excellent. Well, look, thanks for joining us, Dan. Well, look, let's start off by just tell us a little bit more about DK Lift Services.
Yeah, brilliant. So we're a family-run independent business, just based in Dartford in Kent. We're about 8.5 years into business now. We specialise in the installation, the maintenance, and the repair of various sort of public and disabled access solutions and products, such as platform lifts, stair lifts, home lifts, track ceiling hoists. There's quite a varied range in what it is that we do. We're quite a small team of 9 of us, all pretty much with the same vision, and that is to be the household sector, as it were. We find that a lot of
just cut out for a second there, Dan. I heard you say your vision.
Yes.
Just repeat that for me for a second, if that's okay. What was your vision?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the vision is to essentially be the household name for public and disabled access sector. So I think what we find is a lot of sort of the larger corporations, as it were, do undertake the sort of services that we provide, but not necessarily on a sort of specialist basis. And we want to change that a little bit and become that sort of household go-to name.
Oh, I like that. I like that. Okay, and look, I love finding out why people went into business. So if we go back sort of, I think you said 8.5 years, why did you become a business owner, Dan? Was it something you always wanted to do, or was it by circumstances? What happened?
It was, a little bit of both, really. It's so business wasn't something that sort of I was brought up learning. It wasn't something that was ingrained. It was, so if we go back quite a few years, I started my career sort of like mid-2000s as an apprentice, right, for a local company. After sort of a year or so, got made redundant, large contract got lost. So then I found my way into sort of a larger company. Was with them for sort of 15, 16 years, apprentice sort of all the way through. And I think we just got to a point where I hit a wall. I think especially from the engineering perspective. I didn't really want to go into the office, wasn't too keen on that. But there was nowhere to really venture onto. A friend of mine started subcontracting, looked like quite a good route. The wife was pregnant at the time as well, so if there was ever a move to make it was all at once. So started subcontracting myself. Got some really good contracts, supported a lot of companies, so on and so forth. It just developed and rolled from there.
Okay, excellent. And so you mentioned now, I think you said you've got a team of 9 people. Has that just gradually grown over the last over those 8.5 years? And was there, adding another question to that, was there any sort of milestones in that, or did it just suddenly, or did it just gradually grow?
No, so some of it was organic, some of it was sort of forced growth, I guess is the term to put it. So for a very long time it was myself. We had someone sort of working with us to support us, and on the administration side. Then we kind of got to a point where we were looking at larger jobs, larger contracts, larger projects. So sort of around 2019 to 2020. So we brought a few more people onto the books around that time then. I would say sort of at the time, sort of 70 to 80% of our sort of portfolio was in the hospitality industry.
Okay.
Naturally, kind of the progression of COVID hit, hospitality was upside down. It was all sort of no one really knew where they were, and sort of what direction. So um, it was probably fair to say that sort of overnight, sort of 80% of our portfolio was crushed. There was no portfolio there. So we took a step back, and we rejigged the business, changed it slightly, got a new premise, started working on that, and really focused on that public and disabled access sector. And I think from that point, housing associations, sort of larger contracts roll and develop, and then you need sort of the manpower and the expertise to be brought into that. There's only so much you can do. So I think that was part of the forced growth, as it were.
Yeah.
And then I think the organic growth is, we get to a point where we need support in this area, this another engineer, so on and so forth. And I think that's sort of part of the organic growth. So a little bit of both, I suppose, is the answer.
Excellent. And Dan, you mentioned there the challenge of sort of COVID, which obviously was a big impact on the majority of businesses in some way, shape, or form. And you had to to use a word that was topical at the time. You had to pivot. You had to go, right, okay,
Absolutely.
how can we sort of change this, adapt this business because of our reliance on that particular sector. So looking at your business now, if you could wave a magic wand and solve one challenge that you've got right now, what would it be?
Challenge we've got right now, probably staffing. If
Right.
I'm being completely honest, I think that we've got staffing in the areas that we need them at the moment. I think that there's a hole, especially in the engineering side, and I think there is a lack of that skilled engineering labour around at the moment, or on offer, one or the other. So I think that the staffing issue from the engineering side, and having sort of a larger, very experienced engineering team is probably one thing that we lack at the moment. And I think a lot of companies probably lack that as well. So I suppose that would probably be the one issue that if we could sort of resolve in a click of a finger, that would be it.
And it's look, I often hear that from businesses, and it is a challenge, after COVID, after Brexit, all of those sort of things. There's been a number of impacts on that. So certainly finding the right people is absolutely important, isn't it, for any business? It's not just finding people, it's finding the right people. And you mentioned there about, with the right skills, but it's also with the right attitude as well, isn't it? The matching aptitude and attitude to find the right people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think different companies look at sort of attitude in a different way. We're quite different where we're independent. We're quite different to that corporate structure that the majority of people kind of do live in the cycle of. And because we're quite different to that, it's finding people's personality to match, and work ethic, and so on and so forth. It's of course, but people adapt and come on board, and
I think that you've hit a great point there. Is that actually it's finding people that match the culture of your business, because your business has got a certain culture. By the way, not just yours, every business. Every business has a culture, whether it's been whether they've specifically created the culture, or whether it's just naturally grown. So every business has a culture, and values, and those sort of things. But it's finding people, as you say, with the right skills, but also fit into your culture. Because if you bring somebody into a business that doesn't fit your culture or your values, that can have a significant negative impact on a business.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, incredibly negative, in some cases. So it's very, very important. Yeah, it is very important, of course.
Yeah, and so what would you say the biggest learning that you've had since you've been in business? If you think back over the 8.5 years that you've been in business, what's been your biggest learning?
I'd say two things there. I'd say probably I think cash flow management is a key point. I think that every business needs at the start.
Yeah.
Um, it's not something that's ever too late to enforce, but I think having that at the start and that clarity is really important.
Yeah.
And that's and being clear, as funny as that sounds. So I think so from a a CEO position, I think the clarity on instructions, on questions, on the way that things are approached. I
Yeah.
think it's just sort of treating everyone with the sort of the same respect, but still the vision that they might not fully understand exactly what it is you're talking about. Yeah. So I think the clarity is I think that's without a doubt the one of the most important learning things that we've come across.
So so you mentioned two things there. One sort of cash flow. Yeah, look, the lifeblood of any business is cash flow.
Yeah.
As the saying goes, that turnover is vanity, profit is sanity, but cash is king or queen. So yeah, so important to keep on top of that, and have a cash flow forecast, those type of things. But yeah, clarity. That's it's an interesting one. I think if I understood you correctly, what you were sort of saying, they're having a real, not just you having a clarity of what the business stands for and where the business is going, but making sure that everyone in your team has that clarity as well. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, no, without a doubt, and to to ensure that the messages surrounding that are passed clearly. I think that there's sort of that old sort of misconception that an instruction could be taken in two, three, four different ways. And I think definitely from a not necessarily from a leadership point of view, but from a point of view of someone that needs to give instruction, needs to provide sort of answers and solve problems and so on and so forth. I think that clarity is really important, from the start.
Yeah, I think that's again, that's a really interesting point. That I always say that I love this phrase, which is communication is the response you get.
Yeah,
And what that and it links into what you sort of said there, Dan, which is that if somebody hasn't understood what you said, then actually we need to take ownership for that and say we didn't actually communicate that correctly for that person to understand. How often we look at it in a negative way and say, oh, that person didn't understand, for whatever reason. But we
yeah,
need to look in the mirror and say, actually, no, it's because we didn't communicate it effectively for that person. And everybody's, as you mentioned now, people understand messages in different ways. So you could say the same thing to one person and say the same thing to another person, and they interpret it in a slightly different way because of who they are and their knowledge and their experiences. So
yeah,
yeah, I really like that. Yeah, make sure that people understand and be conscious of how we communicate to those people. So great point. And
yeah.
what advice would you give to to any business owners out there? What advice would you give to a business owner?
Yes. I think anyone trying to start maybe a business,
Yeah,
I think enjoy the journey, because it is a journey, and enjoy the freedom and enjoy the you know the the leniency that you can probably have a little bit with your day to day. I think and enjoy that and approach that, but also be prepared to work maybe when your family are asleep, and possibly to work when your friends are out. And I think that having that grit and that determination and having that vision to start with is really important.
yeah,
I think starting a business without that is kind of a dead end as such. But yeah, enjoy the process, because it's there to be enjoyed, and I don't think enough people do actually enjoy the process. I think they get wrapped up way too much into the real day to day stuff, and sort
yeah,
of without seeing the fruit of their reward as such.
yeah. There's a phrase that I use, Dan, which is being in business should give you more life. So yeah, and
Yeah,
that's as we sort of said earlier, actually it's the business is there to give you the life that you want, to give you the life that you want to to spend with your family, the time, the money. Yeah, I think that's a great point. And again, I like what you sort of said there, having a clear vision and the determination to achieve it, and enjoy the journey. And actually, going a little bit deeper there, Dan, you mentioned, you've got young children. You mentioned when you started out on business, your wife was pregnant. How do you balance that? How do you manage having a young family with, well, certainly starting out in business, but also running your own business as well?
It comes with its difficulties naturally. I think there's two pieces to that puzzle. I think that especially with a young family, not so much now. The children are becoming a little bit more self-sufficient and so on and so forth. But I think on the early stages, it is very, very difficult. You're sleep deprived, you're struggling. And you kind of lose that motivation a little bit. I think the best way to describe sort of managing it is you work sort of hours that suit that lifestyle, if that makes sense. So you're still getting you're still getting the productivity, you're still getting the work done, but you'll be working sort of, not awkward hours, but slightly different hours to accommodate for that. So, and it's very, very similar to sort of the staffing structure as well. And what I say to, the staff, and it's, if you've got to drop the kids to school or your kid's sick or so and so, as long as the work's done, it doesn't necessarily matter when it's done, as long as it's done, to a degree, we've got that balance, we've got that flexibility. And I think just taking that sort of into my life as well helps a lot. Even from a business owner point of view or an employee's point of view, I think that flexibility and being able to sort of, foster that, helps massively.
Yeah, again, a couple of great points in there. I think that you've mentioned this. Have a routine and structure in place that suits you. So when are the best hours to work for me, to balance that with my family and my other things in life. So what does that structure, that routine look like? But also just have the flexibility around that as well. If needs be, and actually what you sort of said there as well is ensuring that your team have that as well. That they've got that flexibility if needs be, and that creates a great team, doesn't it? That you look after them, they look after you.
Yeah, no, it really does. It really does, and it creates that trust, I think, as well.
Yeah.
That you can, you can trust them to get, X, Y, and Z completed, and they can also trust to talk to you if they need to. And I think that, it helps, tenfold, massively. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, look, Dan, there's one question that I like to ask everybody that's kind enough to join me on this discussion, and that's this: what is the best advice that you would give to an 18-year-old you? So if you could go back and speak to yourself when you were 18, what would you say to yourself?
Stop trying to please everybody. I think that's probably the best advice. I think that trying to please everyone is a pretty impossible task, isn't it? And I think that the longer you do it, the kind of more time you're spent wrapped up, and not necessarily wasted, but could be put to better use. So yeah, I think, in a nutshell, stop trying to please everyone and, make decisions that are right for you and your family in that moment, in that time, and trust your gut and go with it.
Like it, yeah. Stop trying to please everyone. I like that. That's great advice. Well, Dan, look, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today and sharing more about your business, but also your journey as well. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks for having me.